Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation. My name is Melody and you're watching my presentation on the Sami of Northern Europe for Indigenous Studies 100, the Indigenous Peoples of the World project. I hope you'll be able to take away some new insights and learn some things about the Sami people. I found them to be amazing, resilient, and vibrant, and I decided to research them because I am also of European ancestry, albeit not Sami, but I was curious to see something from that side of the world that I hadn't learned about before, or researched before. And I found that so many of the issues that they've gone through and are still going through are so similar to what we're seeing today with our First Nations brothers and sisters. And I just found it to be really interesting to see the parallels, and I hope you do too. So without further ado, let's so first I wanted to give you a bit of geographical information. On the right-hand side of your screen is a map of Europe, and the highlighted countries are Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. And the bright red shape at the very northern part of those countries is known as Sapmi, which is a combination of Lapland and Sami. And the current population of the Sami people is about 100,000. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see the modern Sami flag. And the circle represents the sun and the moon, the red being the sun and the blue being the moon. And these four colors are very important to the Sami. They're seen throughout their dress and their costume. It's very vibrant, like nature, which you'll come to learn is very important to the Sami. So you'll see these sort of colors repeat throughout. So I wanted to give you a visual representation of the Sami people from previous days to current day. And on the left-hand side of the slide, at the very top left, you'll see a family in front of what's called a lavu, which is their type of teepee. Picture was taken around the 1900s. The picture directly to the right of that is a woman actually who got this picture taken at Ellis Island in 1900. And then the picture below those two, the black and white one, it's a little bit older. This one's from about the late 1800s, but you can see a sort of wide swath of different people at different ages, but again, they're standing in front of those traditional lavus. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see sort of modern day Sami people. The very top is a couple in traditional dress. The bottom left is another different type of traditional dress. And on the very bottom right, you'll see a man in reindeer furs inside one of those lavus, which is like a type of teepee. And I've been inside teepees before, but never one that big. So I found it was very interesting to sort of see what theirs looked like on the inside. And it also reminded me in a way of the teepee at the First Nations University in the main foyer. It sort of looked like those glass panels in this picture, which reminded me of the glass panels at the one at the FNU. So you'll see more similarities like that coming up in the next few. So just a bit of background on the livelihood and the sort of land connection. So the Sami were a nomadic people, so they traveled around this area, Sapmi. They followed the reindeer herds. They lived in cycles with nature. They didn't have any necessarily actual structures that stayed there long, long ago, but they did eventually start moving into different sort of hut-like structures. And as you can see, there's a picture there of a lavu, which is their type of teepee. And then on the right-hand side, you see reindeer people. They were hugely dependent on the reindeer for lots of different things, food and clothing, transportation, their housing. So they also herded them, but they ate them. They really relied on them and really respected them. They let no part of the animal go to waste. Every single part of it was used. They had such great respect for this animal. And they were also very sustainable when it came to other hunting and fishing. They were very skilled when it came to gathering and forestry. So it should be noted that even though reindeer was a big part of their livelihood, they did have other things as well. So here are some examples of Sami culture. On the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see language there. So it has a Scandinavian influence, but it's not necessarily close to other languages that you would think. So it's not close to Norwegian or Finnish or Russian. It's very much on its own. And you'll see on the very bottom, it's really small little box, you'll see Sami there, and then Lop in parentheses. So you can see up above, it's connected to Finnic language, and then it's connected to Finno-Ugric language, and then it's even further connected to Uralic language. So just a bit of an idea there. And So the closest language that it's close to, they would say, is Hungarian. And I don't speak Hungarian, but my grandmother happens to speak Hungarian, and some of even the simplest words are really hard to understand and say. So the point is that it's very unique, and even within the Sami language, there's three subdialects that make up the main language, and that even branches out even further. So there's lots of different types of people that are speaking this language. And then that takes us to clothing, really bright and colorful. The main dress is called a gakti. There's different versions of this in different parts of their area of Sapmi, but typically they're really brightly colored. Another sort of staple of this look is like a long dress for women or an overcoat for men. And then you can see their shoes there. They're horned, and oftentimes the mittens and shoes are made from reindeer hide, even to this day. And in earlier times rather, those entire outfits would have been made out of reindeer hide or reindeer leather, but in modern day they're made with other sorts of materials like broadcloth. And then on the other side of the slide there we have food. Especially back in earlier days, reindeer and fish were a staple in addition to berries and bread. And they were able to make bread because there's evidence of them trading with other civilizations long, long time ago. So they had obviously learned and picked up how to make bread and incorporate it into their own culture. And so it's a real staple even to this day. So some more elements of Sami culture.
Hey everyone, welcome to my project on Indigenous.
The main theme I kept finding was the yoik, which is a traditional song or expression, cultural expression that was sung usually for a significant person or animal. And it was usually done a cappella, which is without the use of instruments. But now in modern times, if you look up on YouTube, you can find lots of different examples of yoiks. They are actually common throughout Europe as well. And it's kind of a combination between throat singing and folk music, if you can imagine it. But hugely important to them, they often sang about nature or to nature. So it was very, very much a part of their culture. Next, I've given you a picture of a bracelet here. Bracelets in particular were very ornamental. They were lots of work went into them. They're originally made with reindeer leather, and then later they added other materials such as pewter. And then other sort of stitching and adornment they added to necklines and hemlines for all of their dress. And then next we have art. Again, like most things in their culture, it was nature-based. It was cyclical. It was art as a way of life. And that word below there, duoji, is kind of like an all-encompassing word that means Sami handicraft. So that could be, painting or stitching or carving or whatever have you. All of them were important, but they all fell under this idea of, one with nature, cyclical, holistic, and art as a way of life. So this ties into their belief systems. And not a whole lot is known exactly what they practiced, but researchers in Sami oral history have really shown evidence of shamanism and animism. It was nature-based, pantheistic, so lots of different gods and spirits. And they had a similar worldview to First Nations here in that all things in nature were sacred and revered. And I find that really interesting because I was raised Catholic, so I've got a totally different worldview to start from as far as a belief system. And you'll see in some of these pictures here, the very top left is a depiction of a shaman with his magic drum. They call those magic drums. They were helped to sort of be a channel to the spirit world and the supernatural, and they helped with interpreting dreams and whatnot. And then in the very bottom, we've got the magic drum there as an example. In the middle, there's a picture of a ritual, and on the right is an idea of their middle world, upper world, and underworld. So this takes us to colonization. You probably knew this was coming. The Sami people inhabited areas in and around Sapmi for thousands of years, but then starting around the 13th century, they started to be subjected to taxes and control, particularly under Russia, Norway, and Sweden. And this led to King Gustav Vasa in 1542 declaring unclaimed lands in Sweden belonged to God and the Swedish crown. And so by the 1600s, their culture was rapidly declining, particularly their belief systems. This is around the time of heretics and burning witches at the stake and doing away with all things nature because it was evil and magic. And as we can see that happened to the Sami as well. And so the next few centuries saw them subjected to forced migration and assimilation into European society. And a lot of it was out of, all of it rather, was out of their control. And particularly when it came to the countries they were in, there were lots of wars going on that they were caught in the middle of, and they were the ones that paid the price. So this is another slide here on colonization, a little bit more recent history. So in the 16 and 1700s, that was when the converting to Christianity really took off, and that's when they really the government put a joint, state-sanctioned effort into doing away with it altogether. And so these colonial powers were also restricting the Sami from moving around, either through taxing or demanding the land and resources they were on. And they also started putting caps on the amount of reindeer that they were allowed to have per family. So lots of the Sami had to slaughter and kill their own animals, which I'm sure would have been devastating. And so all of these countries that they were part of had different ways of trying to force them into submission. So many of them successful, but not entirely. And one of those ways was through boarding schools. Another way was through loss of resources and land, and then also particularly mining expeditions. And you'll see on the right-hand side there of the slide, the very top picture there, that is a picture from one of the boarding schools. So it's eerily similar to residential school pictures that we've seen today. You can see they're not in traditional costume, at least like it looks to us, but they're really on display. And then to the right of that is a picture of current day mining in Sami territory to this day. So you can see those machines are huge and have a huge impact on the environment and things around them. So perhaps this is all starting to sound familiar to things we're learning about in Canada. As you can see, on the left we've got First Nations in Canada, and on the right we've got Sami peoples of Northern Europe. They are so similar that even I made a mistake. If you'll notice at the bottom, I've actually got the pictures flipped. They should be on the other sides of the slide. But I think it kind of proves my point here that we've been learning, especially in class, that climate justice is Indigenous justice. And, they could be at the same protest, really. And like as Wendy has said in class, soon it's going to be our own rights. Civil rights are going to be called into question. And I don't know about you, but that gives me a really icky feeling. And, it's easy to feel a bit hopeless in the face of all this that's happening. So I just wanted to touch on what started to really kick off the modern day uprising and sort of action that we're seeing taken today. Because in 1970, the government made plans to dam this river right through Sami territory, but the flooding of it would have resulted in the loss of thousands of reindeer and encroached on an already devastated people. So there were protests and hunger strikes, and ultimately it didn't stop the dam from being built. However, it did lead to the Sami Act of 1987. And so that Sami Act of 1987 brought new changes to how the government recognized and supported Sami peoples. However, to this day, there are mining expeditions and, stealing of resources, really. So it's a bit skeptical. And there's also another act I didn't mention on here because that would take its whole own presentation, but there's the Finnmark Act of 2005. That if you're interested in looking at more of, you can look it up online. So as you can see there in those pictures, at the very top we've got the protest from 1970, and then at the bottom there, that large lovely group of people, that's the Sami parliament today. And to the right of that is a picture of what the parliament looks like from the outside. And it's very reminiscent of their traditional teepees, which I found very interesting, and a throwback to the land. Again, they're very land-centered and really, really hilly. So I just want to touch very briefly on the Sami peoples and pop culture. So the movies Frozen and Frozen 2 did draw inspiration from Sami culture, and I think it's really important for young people to see a positive representation, especially if you belong to that culture. And there's also, I was reading that some of the voice actors were actually of Northern Sami descent, so that's always helpful to see your own sort of representation. However, it could be argued that it is another case of cultural appropriation. So I just want to leave you with sort of some good news that there's been a lot of positive steps in the right direction for them getting their livelihood back and their vibrant sort of culture allowed to practice it. However, of course, like a lot of things, there's lots of work to be done, and the fact that they've even been able to maintain their identity is amazing, and I'll always be in awe of peoples today that have done that. So here are my works cited if you'd like to take a look at. And I'd like to thank you for watching. Good luck on your reflection. I hope it works out for you. All the best. Bye.